Welcome to the Banyan Books podcast. I'm your host, Ross McKeachie. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Cheryl Richardson. Before we get to her formal introduction, some Banyan announcements. Although we have people joining us from all over the world, the physical location of Banyan Books and Sound is on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Banyan Books and Sound is in its 50th anniversary year this year, 50 years as Canada's spiritual and healing resource. Since 1970, we've been local and independent, and we encourage everyone to please support your local independent bookstores. Every time you make a purchase from Banyan Books, you support all kinds of wonderful programming, just like today's event. You can make all of your purchases at banyan.com, banyen.com, or you can visit us 7 days a week at the corner of 4th and Dunbar in Kitsilano. Our guest today, Cheryl Richardson. For the last 20 years, beloved teacher and coach Cheryl Richardson has dedicated her personal and professional life to the importance of self-care. Cheryl says this: when we care deeply for ourselves, we naturally begin to care for others, our families, our friends, our greater global community, and the environment in a healthier and more effective way. Our honored guest today is the New York Times best-selling author of several books, including The Art of Extreme SelfCare, Life Makeovers, Stand Up for Your Life, The Unmistakable Touch of Grace, You Can Create an Exceptional Life with Louise Hay, and Waking Up in Winter. Her work has been covered widely in the media, including Good Morning America, The Today Show, CBS This Morning, USA Today, Good Housekeeping, and O Magazine. She was the team leader for the Lifestyle Makeover series on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and she accompanied Miss Winfrey on the Live Your Best Life nationwide tour. Cheryl also served as the co-executive producer and host of the Life Makeover Project with Cheryl Richardson on the Oxygen Network, and as the co-executive producer and host of 2 public television specials, Stand Up for Your Life and Create an Abundant Life. She was also the first president of the International Coach Federation. Today, Cheryl Richardson is with Banyan Books in conversation about her new self-care wisdom cards, a 52-card deck which is designed to inspire, refresh, and help you reclaim your life. If you'd like to learn more about today's guest and her work, please visit her website at www.cherylrichardson.com. Banyan community, please join me in a warm welcome for Cheryl Richardson. Cheryl, it's really wonderful to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Ross. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about maybe pulling a card from this wonderful deck that you have to begin with. And while you're shuffling there, I'll just share a quote with everybody from the preface of your book, The Art of Extreme SelfCare, which I think is really wonderful. And I want to ask you a bit more about that after. Cheryl says this: extreme self-care is serious business. So much more than taking warm baths, getting a massage, saying no, or setting new priorities. It's about building self-esteem, becoming emotionally strong and empowered, and developing the kind of character that makes you decisive, clear, and honest about who you are and what you want. Oh, and by the way, contrary to popular fears or beliefs, self-care is not about being selfish. It's about having integrity. When you take good care of yourself, you have the time, space, and energy to give to others because you want to, and you do so from a place of love, not because of habit, guilt, or obligation. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that sort of really sums it up. You know, when I was updating that book, I remember thinking about, you know, what was the message that I wanted to give? Because of course, so many people feel like self-care is selfish. I think that's, in a lot of ways, it's helped us to be very manageable. You know, it's helped us to sort of stay under the thumb of people who have maybe benefited from our overgiving. And I wanted to go deeper and to just really make the point that, you know, the idea is for us to make choices and decisions based on truth, not on obligation, or not on trying to keep people happy, or to prevent people from being angry at us or not liking us. I often say that, you know, if you want to live a soul-directed life, meaning a life that's truly reflective of who you are on a deep level, then you've got to get really comfortable with disappointing people, pissing them off, and hurting their feelings, because that's going to happen. And, you know, I always try to do that as gracefully as possible. But the reality is some people just aren't going to like your choices when you make a choice for yourself instead of them. And we have to get comfortable with that. So anyway, I'll pick a card. Let's just see what card wants to be. This is a great card for the group. So this, we'll just say this is sort of a group message. It's the love card. I actually really love this card. I hope you all can see it. There we go. It's a beautiful, inclusive card. And the message of the card is love people, love them with all your heart. Just be sure to love yourself first. So there you go, right? That's exactly what we're talking about, that too often, a lot of the choices and decisions we make have a hidden agenda. And sometimes that agenda is even hidden from us, right? So it's not necessarily that we're doing something from the pure desire to be loving or supportive or gracious, but really because we feel that we have to, or we should, or someone's going to be upset with us. Or so when we learn to really love ourselves first, to make our self-care a priority, we just show up so much better for people. We really do. That's the bottom line. So anyway.
One of the things you talk about a lot is that we might experience guilt when we start making these choices for ourselves. Can you talk about how we deal with those feelings of guilt?
Yeah. Have you ever felt guilty taking care of yourself, Ross?
Yes.
Recently, by any chance?
Yeah. I think I'm better and better at that not sticking, but definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times what happens, this comes up a lot. You know, I was leading a retreat last month. I do a retreat a couple of times a year here in, actually in Maine, on the East Coast I'm on the opposite side of the country from you, right? And this comes up a lot, where people talk about feeling uncomfortable when they make choices that are to their benefit, or when they set boundaries to take care of themselves, that they end up feeling guilty or anxious. And too often we don't act until we think that, okay, if I just wait for the guilt to go away, then I'll take action. But this is a really important point for all of us. We have to get comfortable with feeling guilty and feeling anxious when we make our self-care a priority. The only way that you will be able to be with those uncomfortable feelings is by experiencing it, right? By making choices and then letting the feelings come up, and then recognizing, okay, wait a minute, what am I thinking that's fueling these feelings? Oh, I really shouldn't have done that. Oh, Mary's going to be upset with me. Oh, people are going to talk about me behind my back. My boss is going to be upset that I didn't stay late when he wanted me to, but I couldn't because I had to get home to my kids. You know, our mind fuels a lot of the guilt and the anxiety that we have about the choices we make. And it's so important to do our best to put separation between ourselves, capital S, the self, the healthy, authentic self, and the mind that just thinks stupid thoughts, that that we bother ourselves with our thoughts. And in particular, when it comes to self-care, we end up making ourselves feel guilty or making ourselves feel anxious by how we think. And if we notice that, the beauty, Ross, is that the minute you notice you're doing this to yourself, you've put some separation between yourself as the soul and the thinking mind, which is more reflective of the personality. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
You can also welcome it in. When I feel guilty, like nowadays, if I make a decision and I feel guilty and I feel those things, I feel anxious. I'm not immune to any of this. I'll say to myself, oh, sweetheart, there's that guilt. There's that guilt. Put your arm around the guilt, include it, and just keep moving forward. You made the right decision. Yeah, you feel uncomfortable about it. So you'll live. Let you just include that feeling and then pay attention to your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the things in that quote I shared, you said that it's not, self-care is not about being selfish. It's about having integrity.
Right.
Can you talk about this integrity?
Yeah, I'm talking about making decisions from truth, right? From, you ask me to, I don't know, somebody asks me to do an event or, gives me an invitation, wants me to do something. And I really don't feel like doing it. Like, it just doesn't feel right to me, but I don't want to upset you, or I want, I don't want you to not like me, or I don't want you to think that I, whatever the stupid thoughts are that I start making up. The truth is, if I say yes when I really want to say no, I'm not going to show up as authentically as I would if I really wanted to do it and said yes. So a friend invites you to dinner, you say yes. And then an hour before you're going to dinner, you're exhausted. You worked later than you expected. You're thinking to yourself, the last thing, I mean, come on, how many of us have had this thought, right? The last thing in the world I want to do is go out to dinner tonight. I'm exhausted, but I told John that I'd meet him, so I've got to do that. Well, what about calling up John and going, listen, I hate to do this last minute, but I'm going to be honest with you. I had a grueling day and I ended up working an hour later than I expected, and I'm exhausted. And rather than show up and kind of be half there, I just wanted to let you know I'd much rather reschedule. Can we do that? That's integrity. That's telling the truth. That's honoring your relationship, both with yourself and with the other person. And I don't know about you, Ross, but I would like, if I'm sitting across from somebody at dinner, I'd actually like to know they really want to be there, that they're really happy to be there, that they're happy to be having dinner with me, that they're not, checking their watch or, so that's what I mean when I'm talking about integrity. Growing yourself up over time to become the person that people can trust, will tell it like it is, will be honest, right? And does it ruffle feathers? Of course. I mean, I've done that before where I've called a friend and said, listen, I hate to do it. And somebody's been disappointed and upset. They're entitled to their feelings, but I'm also entitled to really honor my truth. So does that answer the question?
It does. It does. That's how we stay in integrity, by honoring our own truth.
Yeah.
Cheryl, these self-care wisdom cards are really beautiful cards. I'm wondering, when you created them, what was your intention for how people might include them as a tool in their self-care practice? How can we use the cards?
Well, so first of all, this deck is so different than what I've done before. I don't know if you've seen my grace cards or the earlier self-care cards, which I love European art and Renaissance art and fine art. So this was an illustrated deck, which was a real departure for me. So I was kind of nervous at first, but I work with this wonderful artist in London named Joe Podmore. And I knew the messages that I wanted to convey. And the messages on these cards are a kind of a culmination of messages I've delivered over the last probably 10 years that have had the most bang for the buck. Like, just really kind of deliver a piece of wisdom that makes people stop and think. And so Joe and I work together to come up with fun, playful images sometimes, and sometimes just, just sweet, beautiful images. And I think that I'll be very honest with you. I started creating decks years ago because when I started my business, this is like 25 years ago, I used to give out, I had a woman I met who was a single mom with 2 kids who was trying to support her family, and she was a watercolor artist. And to help support her, I used to pay her to make little hand-painted cards with affirmations on them. And I would bring them everywhere I went. I was known for the little blue box, and it was a blue box that was filled with these little beautiful hand-painted cards that would say things like, I take time for myself, or, just little messages. And people loved them, and I loved giving them out. And then I started like putting them in every piece of correspondence that left my home. And so when Hay House came to me years ago and said, hey, would you like to do a deck? I thought, well, this is my chance to continue. So for me, the primary way I use the cards, and I do think of this as self-care, is I carry a deck in my pocketbook or my purse, and everywhere I go, like when I go to the bank, I put one in the teller drawer before I leave. Or if I have dinner at a restaurant, I leave a card with the gratuity. I'm always handing them out. Sometimes I just leave them around town on benches and bushes and things like that. I put them in birthday cards and holiday cards and all of that. And it just makes me happy. It just makes me very happy to do that. As a self-care tool, I think it's really wise to pick a card a day. It depends. You could pick a card a day, you could pick a card a week and focus on that message for the week. But you could shuffle the deck, pick a card, and just begin to notice for that day or for a few days or the week, how the message of the card shows up for you in your daily life. And it's amazing how it works, right? I picked a card for you before we started, and it'll be really good for you to just notice how that action card plays out for you over the next week. And I can certainly pick some cards for people when we do the Q&A part as well. So sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can actually go through the deck, and when you see a message that you need reinforced in your life, you can pull that card out. I have a little stand. You know how they have what do you call it? When people have dinner, they have like these little stands where they place cards at formal dinners.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can buy them online. They're like really inexpensive little stands. And I have one of those, and I just sometimes will pull a message that I know I need to stay connected to, stick it in the little stand and put it, on my bathroom counter or in my office on my desk. And so yeah, those are some things that you can do. You can have, when you have friends over for a holiday party, you can have everybody pick a card. Some people use them as placeholders on plates. At Thanksgiving, people were putting cards on people's plates or underneath their plates. It's a fun thing to do. So yeah, those are some ideas.
That's great. One of the cards, there's a number of cards that really stood out to me. And one of the ones that it stood out to me a lot was the abundance card. Abundance is something that I feel gets really grossly inflated and harped on in self-development and spiritual circles. Your abundance card was incredibly mature and grounded, and really I couldn't believe
us.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe actually it was a way I'd never thought about abundance and money. And here's what the card says for everybody to know. Being a thoughtful steward for the money you already have is the secret to creating more abundance. When you trust yourself to handle more, that's when more shows up.
Mm-hmm.
When did this specific insight come up for you, and how did that happen?
I'll tell you exactly the story. So when I was in my late 20s, I had accumulated about $15,000 worth of credit card debt, which was a lot of money because I'm 62. So this is quite a while ago, right? So that was a lot of money at the time. And we don't get a lot of training about how to manage money growing up. And a lot of us, credit cards are just brutal because they make it so easy to purchase. And I grew up in a financially oriented family, but I didn't get a lot of education about managing money. So I felt really drained and weighed down by the debt that I had. And at 29 years old, I made a decision that I was going to pay off my debt. And so I made a list of all of the debt that I had, any credit cards. I started with the debt with the highest interest rate, and I put it on top all the way down, hung it on my office wall. And every month I went out, I got a part-time job in addition to the full-time job that I had. And I said I was going to dedicate the part-time income to eliminating my debt because I didn't want to be ruled by it anymore. And so every month I would start to pay off the debt with the highest interest rate first. And at the end of a year, I paid off $5,000 of $10,000 in debt. Maybe it was like 8 months, something like that. And then an elderly friend of mine died. And in her estate, she left me money. Guess how much money she left me? $5,000 to pay off the rest of the debt. And I just thought to myself, Ross, there is no coincidence that that happened. When I immediately took that $5,000, paid off my debt in full, and then never, ever carried a balance on a credit card again. And what I learned as I would go on to coach people, and I want everybody to listen to this, this is really important. When I talk about being a good steward for the money you already have, we all have a wise self, this wise part of us that loves us and wants the very best for us. And if we don't take care of the money we already have, if we don't balance our checkbook, so many people don't, if we don't pay our bills on time, if we accumulate debt that we can't pay off, if we use credit cards that we can't afford to use, we're constantly sending a message to that wise part of us that we're not a good steward for money. So it's almost like we say, don't send me any more because I can't handle what I already have. And the more we take a mature, responsible position and start handling our finances in a responsible way, it's like our wise self goes, okay, you know what? Clearly, I love you. I want to bring you the abundance of the universe. It is not enough to just sit in the middle of a room and meditate and just visualize abundance and have dollar bills fall down. That's just stupid. That's immature. That's magical thinking. It's a combination of intention and affirmations and practical action, which means get your act together financially. Is it easy? No, it was really hard for me. I worked a lot to pay off that debt. But I'll tell you, the next 40 years of freedom of never being chained to a credit card and the ridiculous interest rates and late charges has been heaven. It was a wonderful practice. So start simply with what's the one thing you need to do to take better care of your finances, and do that. And then begin to pay attention, do it consistently. And then begin to pay attention to the little ways that abundance starts showing up in your life as you make your self-care around money more and more of a priority. You'll see it happen. I've got plenty of stories that back that up, without a doubt.
Wonderful. That's so great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got a lot of questions rolling in. I thought we'd get to one. There's one from Chris that I think is a good question. Chris says, I respect the concept of self-care and honoring it. However, my experience is that the younger generations are very much into taking care of self and really ignore the power of compassion and helping others. Balance is essential, and I'm afraid the pendulum has been moving too far to the self-care direction.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that, Cheryl?
Well, Chris, it's funny. My first reaction is I totally get what you're saying. One of the things that's very interesting, if we look at the younger generations, they are making their self-care a priority in the way that we didn't. And I actually really am glad about that. I also want to say that a lot of times when we start making changes individually and then collectively, the pendulum swings way to the opposite direction before we come back to balance. So I'm always just mindful of the fact, even like with clients, back when I had a coaching practice, sometimes my clients would, they'd need to swing, they'd need to be like overly selfish in order to be able to find some kind of a happy medium. So, Chris, that I guess I got to go back to the individual, which is, we often see what we look for. So you want to pay close attention to being a great power of example of the balance that you're talking about, and begin to look for the younger generations who actually are loving and kind and interested in being supportive and are for whom the pendulum hasn't swung. Like, just begin to look for that. The only place we have any true power is in our own backyard and in our own experience of life, right? And I'm a big believer in just be a power of example. Be somebody who takes really good care of yourself. Be somebody who is loving and respectful of others. Be somebody who maintains that balance in your own life. And the rest will take care of itself. I honestly could talk about like some of my concern. Listen, I'm one of 7 children. I've got 15 nieces and nephews. I see the advantages that these kids have that we never had growing up. I grew up in a very, pretty poor family. And I was working when I was 14 years old to help put food on the table for my family. And what I see kids nowadays having that, that we couldn't even dream of, I could have a lot of opinions about that, but what's that going to do for me? It's not going to do anything except maybe make me a little cynical, or, make me look for the very things that I want to be a power of example and supportive, to the kids that the younger generation. I'm now, kids are a tough audience. And what I've learned with them is the best thing I can do is really just be truthful and be as much of a walking example of what I teach as I can possibly be. I don't know. I hope that's helpful, Chris.
Thank you, Cheryl. There's a couple of people asking if you would pull a card for them. And I'm wondering, before you do that, I think we'll go with Kathy. Kathy says, "Hi, Cheryl. If possible, I'd love if you'd pick a card for me. Thanks. Love, yes. Kathy." And I'm wondering if you could also just kind of fan the cards out so people can get a sense of what the deck looks like.
Let's see if I can. What I'll do is I'm going to, hi, Kathy Heskett. I know who Kathy is. And so I'm going to, it's a little bit hard to fan these, to tell you the truth. And partially because I just shuffled them all up. And they're going all different ways. But let's just see, like, you can see, like, this is a great card. I love the message on this card. It's called Peace. And the message is, just because some people are fueled by drama doesn't mean you have to attend the performance. Make your life a drama-free zone. That message is an important one, people.
Yes, I really like that card.
Yeah, this one, if you can see, it says ease. Today, I allow life to be easy. That message came from a blog that I wrote a long time ago about how I automatically expected things to be hard and challenging, and then they often were. And what happens when we decide that life is going to be easy. So let me pick one for Kathy.
Great.
I'm just going to shuffle them up, Kathy, and close my eyes, and then here we go. This is the focus card, Kathy. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
And it says, if you focus on what you don't want, there's a good chance you might get it. Focus on what you do want instead. Now, that's an important message because a lot of us spend a lot of conscious and unconscious time focused on the things that we really don't want to have happen, whether we're arguing with somebody in our head or imagining worst case scenario. And so the card is just a reminder that it's a really important practice to do something formally every day that has you focused on the things that you do want in your life rather than the things you don't want. And so, Kathy, that's your opportunity to look at, it could be, I do this every night before I go to bed. I have a little like diary next to my bed. I track my meditation. I track my workouts. I track the animals, the wildlife I see. And I also I just jot down 3 or 4 positive things that I'm intending for myself. It could be, fun time with friends, time spent in nature, healthy, fit body, fun and adventure, like just as a way to train myself to, and I have a list, Kathy, of like, I think 8 intentions that I printed out that I keep in my bathroom that I look at every single day. And they're the things that are deeply important to me. Feed myself well, move my body, fun time with Michael, my husband, fun and deepening my relationship with Michael, those sorts of things. These practices help us to stay focused on what it is we do want instead of what we don't want.
Wonderful. Thank you. Cheryl, with the COVID pandemic situation worldwide, have you been finding that your message around self-care has been more important for people? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I would say especially when it first hit and we sort of all went into lockdown in some capacity, there was a lot of trauma around that, a lot of anxiety, still is a lot of anxiety. Certainly with the new variants, this is a virus, it's air. It's very difficult to capture air and protect people from it. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of practices to reduce anxiety. So for example, I would say to everybody listening, a couple of important things, very simple little self-care tips that I've talked a lot about over the last couple of years. It's important to know that the minute you close your eyes, your brain begins to make alpha waves. And those alpha waves are the brainwave patterns that allow us to start to relax and fall asleep just by closing your eyes. So even if you don't want to relax, if you close your eyes, you automatically will start to relax. Now, if you also breathe in through your nose and then breathe out even more slowly through your nose, so you make the exhale longer than the inhale, you engage the body's parasympathetic nervous system, and it starts to calm you down, whether you want to be calm or not, right? So the thinking mind is what gets us all worked up. And if we start to just focus on the breath, and you can do it by counting even, counting in 2, 3, 4, and then out 2, 3, 4, back and forth like that, where you're breathing out more slowly than you're breathing in, you'll naturally start to calm yourself down. A lot of people, especially during lockdown, it was as if they were sent to a forced retreat. And a lot of people haven't had the experience of being with themselves for that long without distractions. And it just, even if we didn't have a pandemic and you were somebody who decided you wanted to make your self-care more of a priority, it would be uncomfortable at first to start cutting back on some of your activities, spending more time with yourself, spending more time at home. Most of us live incredibly distracted lives. So even without a pandemic, it's uncomfortable shifting those gears. But with the pandemic, everybody was sort of forced into that. It's like I sent you to a self-care retreat, whether you liked it or not, and now you got to live with yourself. And most people are not very comfortable. Most people's minds are not very safe and comfortable places to be. We're self-critical. We imagine worst case scenario. If you look at the news, it's over. I mean, all you're doing is just filling yourself with really, really difficult, uncomfortable, scenarios in your head. And so I talked a lot about the importance of meditation, 10 minutes, set an alarm on your phone. Get used to being with your crazy mind, just observing the crazy thoughts. And as you do that, as you make it a daily practice, you put some space between yourself, capital S, and your thinking mind, and you begin to see that, oh, I'm bothering myself with my thoughts. And I don't want to do that anymore. So this message of self-care has been way more important, taking care of our bodies. I mean, look, it makes me insane that there's so much focus on vaccinations, which are important without a doubt, but there's nothing, you're not seeing anything about the importance of feeding yourself well, moving your body every day, building the immune system. You know, there's reasons people die of COVID that are beyond the virus. It's, you know, because of the way, I mean, there were people with physical scenarios going on that make them more susceptible to being very sick when they catch, if they catch COVID, because they haven't taken care of their bodies. And we need to put more emphasis on that. So there's a lot of people who really improved their diets, lost weight, got healthy. And then there's a whole bunch of people who did the complete opposite. And those self-care messages are so important, especially as we get older. You know, I realize as I get older, I want to have as much mobility and the highest quality of life I possibly can for as long as I can. Louise Hay used to say, she would always say to me, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, dead. Like that's how she wanted it to be. And it's almost what happened to her. You know, she died in her sleep and she was going strong for almost, you know, 85, 90 years. So she took good care of herself.
You had a close relationship with Louise Hay, and I saw in another interview you told the story of how she told you something that really stuck with you. She said to you, "You will be with you longer than anybody else. Make it a good relationship."
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
I mean, that was a very powerful moment. You know, you will be with you longer than anyone else on the planet, Cheryl. Why not make it a good relationship? So think about that, right? All of you just think about, it's true. The most important relationship we have is with ourselves. We're listening to ourselves all day long, right? A lot of what we hear isn't that great, by the way. But when she said that to me, it just reinforced the importance of putting an emphasis on consciously building a loving, supportive, caring relationship with ourselves. You know, in the self-care box, I got to put like a little message on the inside of the box that they come in. And the message says, what if being kind to yourself really could change everything? Right? Now that sounds like a lovely idea, doesn't it? But you know, this is what Louise was saying, like, what if deciding that you are going to truly become the best possible friend to yourself that you can be, and that you're going to do everything you possibly can over this next year to make that happen? Because ultimately you're the one you're going to spend all your life with. And I just think it kind of, it drove home the point of how important it is to practice good self-care.
Wonderful, thank you. There's a question here from Matt that I feel will be pertinent for a lot of people. Matt says, is there a point where self-care becomes too much? I am getting a lot of pressure from my family abroad to travel and spend Christmas with them. I don't feel like it, would rather stay home with my dear cats, but feel selfish by letting them down. What do you think? Would love your opinion. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm a cat woman, so you've got me there. And my mother is too. My mother has 2 cats. And you know, one of the things I love, did you say it was Matt?
Matt, M-E-T-T-E. So Matt or Meta?
Okay, Matt. Okay. It's funny. So my mother, I see right there. Yes, Matt. I hope we're saying it right. But so my mother is going to be 85 in February, and she has 2 cats. and she really demonstrates good self-care. You know, Matt, she said, I'll say things to her like, Mom, why don't you come up and visit? You can spend a couple nights. Like every now and then I'll have her come and visit. She lives about an hour and a half away. And she used to always come up fairly regularly, and we would do a queen for the day where I'd have her come up and I'd treat her like a queen. I'd get her a massage and I'd get her like her favorite meal, and we'd do all of that. And I said to her, you know, just probably a couple of weeks ago, Mom, you know, why don't you come up? It's the holidays, you know, we'll do queen for a day. And she's like, no, you know what? I really like being home with my cats. So, you know, at some other point maybe, but right now I just want to be home with my cats. And I thought, like, I didn't feel like it was a personal affront. I thought, good for her that she just could say the truth. And Matt, you know, again, first of all, travel right now. My husband and I were supposed to go to London next week for a vacation I've been waiting for a long time. When it started to feel like it was too much work to plan the trip, we just canceled it. And I think traveling right now, use the pandemic as the perfect excuse. You know what? Traveling right now is too risky. There's too much of a hassle. You can't be sure, like, God forbid you travel someplace and you come down with COVID. Number one, you don't know what the healthcare is going to be like. And number two, what if you get stuck someplace? So I think you're saying here, I'm getting a lot of pressure from my family. I don't feel like it. I'd rather stay home with my cats. Well, there's the truth. And I understand pressure from family is hard, but you could tell the truth, which is, you know what? I love all of you and I'm feeling pressured to come, but I'm not going to be able to. And I really hope that you still love me, or that you're not upset. Like, you can kind of use humor. I hope you still love me, or that you're not too upset, but I just have to take care of myself. And especially right now with the new variant and with the travel restrictions that are going on, this isn't the best time. That's how I'd handle it.
That's great. Thank you.
And let's pick a card. Let's just pick a card for Matt and see.
That's a good idea.
I'm going to just pick, let's see. I promise you I am just, oh my God, this is too funny, Matt. So this is a card, it's called Reassess. And the message of the card is, you have the right to change your mind. There you go, my dear. I'd say that's a little divine intervention.
That's so great. That's so great. There you have it, Matt.
Yes.
We have a really nice question from Susie, who says, how to recover from a long-term toxic work life and get rid of the mindset of fight or flight responses to adjust to a 360-degree change in environment and accept fairness, kindness, respect, and inclusion.
So Susie, I wonder how to recover from a long-term toxic work life. Well, first of all, the whole fight or flight response, you know, this is what happens when we're in toxic environments, right? The adrenal system's constantly, it's like gas, gas, gas. So one of the first things I would say is when you're dealing with adrenal fatigue, which is what happens when the fight or flight response is constantly being triggered. It's a really great time to, if it were me, I'd recommend going to a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor and just having some testing done. Vitamin D levels, you know, just a normal blood workup anyway, but just looking at DHEA levels, you know, some of the things related to the adrenal system, because this is important. Too often we forget that if the body is out of whack and chronic fight or flight problems causes the body to be out of whack, if we don't heal the body, then it's very difficult to change our mindset. They work hand in hand. So it's not enough, you know, it's not enough for me to just say, well, here's some affirmations and, you know, here's some self-care practices. Like, the fundamental first self-care practice for me is, let me take a look at my body. Let's get some testing done, see what's going on. Let's look at my inflammation levels. You know, a good functional medicine doc or a naturopath will know exactly what to look at to see about the state of health as it relates to the adrenal system. The calmer the body, the easier it is to calm the mind. So think about it. I'm not a coffee drinker. If I drank a cup of coffee right now, I'd be talking a mile a minute and I'd want to like wash the floors, right? My body would be all jittery. Is it going to be easy for me to meditate? Probably not, right? It's going to be hard. I'm going to sit down and my mind's going to go to, oh, I think I didn't lock the front. Oh, I need to feed the cats. Like my mind's going to be going crazy. So we want to first look at what the body needs to be able to calm down, number one. Number two, Susie, this is where a regular meditation practice where you really use your breath. When we deep breathe, we begin to metabolize cortisol. So breathing in slowly through the nose and then even more slowly out, and making that a daily practice is a beautiful way to calm both the mind and the body. Physical exercise also metabolizes cortisol. Today, if I'm upset about something, if something pushes my buttons and I'm stressed, I'm going to go right into my gym and get on an elliptical and start doing, something for 10 minutes just to move the cortisol out of my body. That's what animals do in the wild, right? Gazelles running through the field, tiger comes out of nowhere, chases it. The gazelle starts running for its life. The adrenaline is pumping, everything's going crazy. The tiger gets distracted and goes somewhere else, and the gazelle goes to hide. And what does it do? It shakes. Shake, 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 shake. That's what it does. It's the trauma response to release all the trauma in the body, and then it'll sleep it off. So for us, getting out and moving, jumping up and down, going for a brisk walk, it metabolizes cortisol and helps to calm things down. Now, I don't know from your question if you're now in a new work environment. I hope you are. And this is a very wise perspective to ask how to adjust to a 360-degree change in an environment, because Susie, you are going to have to adjust. Much like being in an abusive relationship, whether it's emotionally or physically abusive, we learn certain patterns of behavior, certain protective patterns of behavior in dysfunctional relationships that need to get unlearned. And one of the best ways to deal with something like that, I think, quite frankly, is to get into therapy, to find a really good therapist who specializes maybe in, excuse me, toxic work environments or even work addiction, and let them know, I came from a very toxic environment. I want to work with you to identify the habits and behavior patterns that I developed to survive that environment, so that I can shift how I operate and welcome in and be able to function in a much healthier and loving environment. I don't think we can do that on our own. Too often we go to the very thing that creates the problems in the first place, our own thinking. We need the thinking of people outside of us to help us create new ways of being in the world. And that's what I would recommend.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
There's a question from Donna who says, as a daughter of a narcissistic father, I have to constantly work to stand in my alignment. Any words of wisdom for self-care around being with him without losing my peace?
So if in fact your father is a true narcissist, Donna, then I would recommend that you do a lot of reading about narcissism to understand what you're dealing with. Honestly, being around narcissism is like being around a really bad virus. I want you to hear this, Donna. When we're in the company of a narcissist, we can't help but take a hit to our emotional immune system. So we lose power, which means we succumb to their dysfunctional behavior much more easily, regardless of how healthy you are. Like, I'm a pretty smart woman. I've been teaching self-care for a long time. I've done a lot of therapy and I understand narcissism. If you put me in a room with a narcissist for 3 hours, I'm going to start I'm going to lose power. I'm going to start behaving in ways that I normally don't behave just to kind of protect myself. So I think you really need to limit the amount of time you spend with narcissistic people. And I think you have to have realistic expectations. It's not easy maintaining peace around narcissism. breathing, not engaging, setting some boundaries, very clear boundaries, and then backing those boundaries up with action. So for example, if your narcissistic father likes to goat you or likes to, poke at you, or is, let's say, is just critical of you, saying something like, Dad, it's not okay for you to speak to me that way. And if you continue to do that, I'm going to need to leave. Now, you never set a boundary like that until you're ready to actually leave. And if he does it again, which he will, because you've trained him that it's okay, right? That's what we do. When we tolerate behavior, we kind of let people know it's okay. But when he does it again, Dad, I'm telling you, if you continue to speak to me that way, I'm going to need to leave. And if he does it the third time in the beginning, you need to get up and leave and recognize that no matter how intellectually you understand narcissism, the influence of a narcissist on you is weakening you regardless of how smart you are. So you've got to really limit your time. And I've had clients, narcissism is a therapy issue. It's not a coaching issue. But I've had clients with narcissistic parents who had to sever the relationship because otherwise their whole lives would have been ruined. And I don't know if your father's a narcissist or if he just behaves that way. A lot of people, as they get older and they haven't done any work, become very narcissistic. It's all about them and their fear, right? It's just natural. And so, I see it in elderly friends and family members, and I just show up being loving and compassionate and limiting the amount of time I spend there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
The question before from Susie, she responded and said, yes, the new job is great. So she's
good.
back in a new job.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. I'm so glad, Susie. Thanks for letting me know.
Cheryl, you mentioned there, that's a job for narcissism is a job for therapy, not for coaching. What is the difference between a coaching situation or coaching relationship and a therapy relationship?
So generally speaking, coaching is really about, where I am today, the specific goals that I want to accomplish, by when, an action plan to make it happen, and a coach who's going to support you in taking those actions on a consistent basis, and brainstorming when you're not able to take actions, really looking at what might be getting in the way. So it's very action oriented. It's not storytelling oriented. It's certainly not treating mental illness at all. It's not dealing with chronic or let's say long-term grief or depression. All of those are therapy issues. Narcissism, as I said. Therapy is really about where you are today and how your past influences where you are and your inability to maybe move forward. And again, generally speaking, it's certainly about healing trauma, dealing with mental illness. It's much more why focused, like why, looking at why things have happened, looking at what needs to heal. Coaching is much more what focused. Okay, what needs to get done here in order to move you forward in where you need to go? Do they overlap? Sometimes, yes. A lot of times therapy issues will come up in coaching, and a coach needs to be well trained to know the difference between the two and to know when it's time to refer a client to a therapist. They should not be taking on therapy issues. I could run through your whole, question list here and go, okay, that's a therapy issue. That's a coaching issue. You need experience to know the difference. And a good coach does know the difference between the two. An experienced coach, a well-trained coach.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's really good clarity for everyone to have. There's a question from Kathleen who says, I'm worried that my extreme self-care has led me to become avoidant. How do I know the difference, and how can I help myself be less avoidant?
That's a hard thing for me to answer, Kathleen, without getting more information from you. So I'll say this to you. I'll say, it shows me you've got a pretty decent level of self-awareness that you would even ask that question. Does it mean that you're isolating? That's a problem. That's not extreme self-care, right? I guess it's really, I'd need to know more about what you're avoiding. And unfortunately, I know we don't have the time or the space to do that, but um, the fact that you're asking that question tells me it's worth exploring, Kathleen. And so you could explore that with a therapist. You could also explore it with a close friend that you trust, who you could ask for some objective feedback. Here's some of the things that I'm doing, and I'm calling it extreme self-care, but I'm wondering if I'm avoiding something that's important, and just kind of get some objective perspective from somebody who you feel like really has their act together, someone in your life that you admire in terms of their own level of self-care. I guess that's the best way I could answer it without more info.
Thanks, Cheryl. You know, it reminds me, one of the cards I really liked was the risk card.
Mhm.
The risk card, it said, take a chance. Every risk is a success when you're committed to learning and growth.
Yeah.
And it struck me that you included that card in a self-care deck. It's not all about boundaries and closing down and saying no to things. There's also that need to expand in our self-care practice.
Without a doubt. I mean, Joseph Campbell said that most people talk about wanting to have, most people talk about a search for meaning in their life, but that he really believed people were searching for aliveness. And that's a big part of self-care. And I love that he said that, taking risks and knowing that every risk is an opportunity to learn and grow. Louise Hay, one of the things I swear that kept her alive and vibrant for so long was she was a passionate student. She was taking art classes with 8-year-olds when she was 80. I mean, she just loved to learn, and I love to learn. She and I shared that in common. And so taking risks gives us an opportunity to learn about ourselves, to learn about whatever it is we're risking. And I think we all need to do that. And sometimes for Kathleen, it might be taking the risk of going and finding a therapist or finding a coach and talking about, self-care and avoidance and that, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself from that for sure. All right, so I'm just looking here and I see I have a namesake, Cheryl, who says, will you pull a card for me? So I have to do that. It's looking me right in the eye. Cheryl Uphill. Here we go. Oh, I love this card. The possibility card. And it says, focus your attention on what could go right. When you learn to imagine the best case scenario, you get to enjoy an experience twice. So just in case, Cheryl, you have a tendency to focus on worst case scenario, I would encourage you, one of the things, I have a friend of mine who gave me this great practice. She does these, okay, you all are going to think I'm crazy, but whatever. It's the beauty of getting older. I don't really care. She has this wonderful exercise where she makes up memories. She makes up positive memories. And she uses them when she finds herself worrying about worst case scenario or ruminating or perseverating about something. And so I have these great memories. I make up these great memories. Like if I'm upset about something, I imagine myself on stage with Prince singing while he's playing guitar as backup. I imagine that I had a concert with Prince and we were playing together on stage. Or I imagine that I was in a triathlon and came out the winner. Like, we need to lighten things up sometimes and make things fun. And it's this friend of mine who does a lot of work with the brain was saying, teaching people how to make up intentional memories, imagining, like the brain can't tell the difference. It doesn't know that you didn't do it. The brain doesn't know that I'm not performing with Prince, and I could decide I'm performing with him on the other side. So we open ourselves to possibilities. When we just make things up, my husband and I just are finishing watching the Beatles documentary that came out on Disney Plus. There's a beautiful example of, this iconic band who produced this unbelievable music. And when you watch this documentary, you see how much they just made stuff up, and they were playful and messy. And so possibilities come from our willingness to focus on what could go right and what's different and what did go right instead of worst case scenario.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Before we close, we're getting towards the end of our time here. A couple of comments from people whose questions you answered. Kathleen, who had asked about the being avoidant, she said, I mean that I'm saying no to so many things and avoiding people and challenges.
Yeah. Okay, good. So there you go. If you're avoiding challenges, then that may be avoidant. Saying no, most people have, honestly, if I were coaching people today, I'd probably coach them to remove 50% of what they have on their plates. So saying no isn't surprising to me, to say no to a lot of things. But when you're avoiding people, sometimes you're avoiding them because they're not the healthiest people to be around or the most enjoyable to be around. That's okay unless they're confronting you, in which case you're going to have to face that challenge of being honest head on, right? So I can see where there's both things going on there for sure. And Sonia, I'd say the same thing to you that I said before about narcissism. Study narcissism and get yourself a therapist. Forget about getting your husband into therapy. The best course of action for your mental sanity is to understand narcissism and to get help. Even if it means it's perfectly okay for you to not tell your husband that you're going into therapy. You can lie about that. You can find yourself a therapist and just not tell him about it, because you need help outside of a narcissistic relationship to figure out how to maneuver that. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm really curious to know, and I'm sure everyone in the audience is, what are you working on now? Are you planning to write any more books? Or are you just focusing on your workshops and work with clients, or what's next for you?
Well, I stopped coaching, so I'm no longer coaching. I haven't been for a while. I do 2 retreats a year. I'm looking at how that might change as well in the new year. But really what's next for me is I'm focused on creating space and allowing what's next to find me. I did just finish 2 projects with Sounds True. One audio project will be out the beginning of next year. It's called How to Survive the Loss of a Pet. Very practical program for people who are heartbroken over losing animals. And that came from my own loss of our cat, Poupon. And then the second audio project, which will be out halfway through the year, is called Self-Care for the Wisdom Years. And it's kind of like the Art of Extreme SelfCare, but it's in audio form and it's for later in life, specifically how we practice self-care as we enter our wisdom years. So I just finished those. I literally just finished the recording last month. So I'm taking a break, Ross.
Wonderful.
I'm creating space. And, you know, I write my blog almost every week. Sometimes I rerun one, but I write a blog every week. And I'm enjoying life. I'm doing cold plunging and playing with my cats and my husband and, you know, doing fun things, learning, studying the brain. I'm passionate about that these days, and the Enneagram, which I love. And so
that's great. That's great. I'm happy to hear that you're taking the space, and I look forward to hearing what arises anew for you.
Yeah.
Now, if people want to read your blog or learn more, they can go to your website, right? CherylRichardson.com. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a delight to have you here, and I'm sure our audience got a lot out of everything that you shared.
Thank you so much, Ross. It was great to talk to you and Jacob. Both of you are great. Wonderful what you do here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.